U.S. is launching its 8th strike on a suspected drug trafficking boat, this time in the Pacific Ocean. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says 2 narco-terrorists were killed in this one. No U.S. forces hurt. He says the boat was operated by a designated terrorist organization. National correspondent Griff Jenkins with me here now in Washington. Hi, Griff.
Hi, Aisha. And you know, it is the 8th strike that we've seen since the beginning of September, but it's the first in the Eastern Pacific, just off the coast of Colombia. The previous 7 strikes were all in the Caribbean. Now, Secretary of War Hegseth says the vessel was struck yesterday while being operated allegedly by a designated terrorist organization, posting this video you see here and adding this. The vessel was known by our intelligence to be involved in illicit narcotics smuggling, was transiting along a known narco-trafficking transit route and carrying narcotics. There were 2 narco-terrorists aboard the vessel during the strike, which was conducted in international waters. Both terrorists were killed and no U.S. forces were harmed in this strike. Narco-terrorists intending to bring poison to our shores will find no safe harbor anywhere in our hemisphere, just as Al-Qaeda waged war on our homeland. These cartels are waging war on our border and our people. There will be no refuge or forgiveness, only justice. That message pretty clear there, Aisha. Now, the 2 casualties brings the death toll from all the strikes to 34 people. And it comes as President Trump asserts that the U.S. is engaged in a, quote, armed conflict with drug cartels. But Aisha, there's a lot of unanswered questions here regarding this strike, like the identities or nationalities of the alleged drug traffickers, what kind of drugs were on the boat, and what kind of strike was carried out. Was this a U.S. drone strike, or did they use a different weapon system? We've got calls out to the Pentagon for more details. So far, though, we're just being referred to Secretary of Hegseth's statement. But one thing is for sure, these strikes are likely to continue.
They will. Griff Jenkins live for us. Thank you.
Yes, the strikes are likely to continue and actually need to ramp up, get greater in frequency and impact and severity. Hey, really appreciate you rolling up to Courageous Media. Thanks so much for being here. Hope you're having a great day. Please let us know you're here in the comments. Smash that like button for me. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So we've got more news on the ongoing war against the drug cartels. South American, Central American, Mexican cartels that have basically inundated America. They have run the middle part of the American continents, South and North and Central, for the better part of 30, 40 years. And enough is enough. Donald Trump has said, we've had it with this. We're done. We are no longer trying to mitigate the drug trade. We are going to destroy it. And therefore, he declared war. He declared them all foreign terrorist organizations, which opens up the pocketbook. It opens up the rule book. It allows for us to go after them where they sit. We don't have to wait for them to come to U.S. shores and then try to interdict them and arrest them and put them through a U.S. justice system. No, they're foreign terrorist organizations, and they will be treated as such. They are foreign enemy combatants as such. So I really appreciate you rolling up. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would love to hear from you. So we've got, we saw that one strike. We also had another strike that was carried out in close succession. I want to dive into that real quick. We're going to pull that up, and then we're going to pull up because Trump, in the midst of all this, had a law enforcement roundtable where obviously all of these things came up. They were discussed. We want to get in with that. This was the previous drone strike that happened right before the first. And so these have been going on with increased frequency. As you heard from the report, the ones that we know about, the ones that have actually been published, we know of 34 deaths. We know of 8 interdiction drug strikes on boats, and they are curtailing the drug trade. But this is more than just, hey, you know what, we're going to strike a few boats and this is somehow going to end the drug trade. That's not what this is about as much. It is also about a deterrence factor. It is about, do you really want to risk your life? See, up until now, when you're talking about the drug trade, when you're talking about the cartels, what was the risk? All right. So I'm a low-level cartel guy. I get into a boat with a bunch of drugs. I drive it to, the United States or some other place. So as I drive it to the United States, I get off, right? I get paid handsomely for all my work, theoretically. And what's my biggest risk? Oh, I get caught. I get caught by the U.S. authorities. Okay. So I get detained. I get put in prison, or I get released on bail and I simply go back to my country of origin. Or let's say I get detained without bail. But now I've probably got cartel lawyers that are going to stick up for me because they don't want me rolling on the bigger operation. So most likely, if worst comes to worst, I'm going to do some time in a U.S. federal penitentiary. I'm not doing time in CCOT. I'm not doing time in a Venezuelan jail. No, I'm doing time in basically a country club of comparison. So there wasn't a whole lot of real deterrence. Well, now we have changed that. Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and this administration have changed that game. They have basically said, no. The cost for doing business as the drug cartel, as a low-level member, as any member of the drug cartel, is not a potential incarceration in a U.S. prison country club. No, it's death. It is the end of your life. We are no longer playing games. So I'd like to know what you think. Now, at the same time, let's dive in because Trump had very similar words in a couple different instances. But I loved what he said in terms of what is our objective here, because he is absolutely redefining the paradigm when it comes to how we think about drug cartels and how we treat drug cartels. So check this out. This was Trump at the Law Enforcement Summit, which they held yesterday. Check this out when asked about the drug cartels.
Under the Trump administration, we're finally treating the cartels as the core national security threat that they really are. The cartels are waging war on America, and just as I promised in the campaign, we're waging war on them like they've never seen before. All you have to do is turn on your television and you'll see what's happening to them. Past administrations have tried to mitigate this threat, and our objective is to eliminate it. We're not mitigating, we're eliminating. We're getting them out. The bad ones we're putting in prison. We hate to do that because that means we're stuck with them for 50 years or more. In recent weeks, our Homeland Security Task Forces seized more than 70 tons of deadly narcotics, along with more than 1,000 illegal guns. And that's just recently. This is already the most successful anti-cartel and anti-gang operation in American history, and it's just getting started. We have incredible people. A lot of them are in this room with us today, and it's an honor to have them. But we're going to not stop until the threat has been fully and completely eradicated.
So, like Trump said, this is no longer about mitigation. We are here to eliminate the cartels and their illicit drug trade in the United States, which has essentially been a war on the United States, perpetrated not just by the cartels, but by their financial and strategic backers in the CCP and Russian state security. Make no mistake, the biggest player behind this is the CCP. The CCP has been organizing, funding, and helping, aiding and abetting the cartels because they want nothing more than to destabilize the United States. If they can destabilize the United States, they destabilize the entire Western world, and that leaves the door open for potential dominance of the world by the CCP. And Russia is thinking the exact same thing, just on a smaller scale, because Russia does not have the economy or the war footing that the current CCP has. But they're thinking no less in terms of if we can destabilize the United States, then at least we can level the playing field worldwide, and maybe we make it a little more chaotic and we can operate with more impunity. But number one is the CCP. They've been behind this whole thing from the get-go. Now, I love what Stephen Miller said, because Stephen Miller jumped in here and talked about the extent to which this is so important to the United States. As we dive into that, please, if you're watching, let me know that you're here in the comments. Really appreciate everybody rolling up. Let us know you're here. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. But would really love to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Trump's war on the cartels? Do you think he's doing anything wrong? Let me know. But check out Stephen Miller's comments, which I thought were really apropos.
Let me just say, Mr. President, that this country was going to die without you. This country was going to actually die without you. That's what we were facing in 2024. We've been invaded for 4 years. Our communities were sinking. Our public safety had gone to zero. Cartels were running entire communities. Sex trafficking, child trafficking, labor trafficking was out of control. Overdoses were out of control. The cartels were claiming more and more territory. City services were buckling. This was a country on the verge of dying, and you alone saved it. And when you stepped forward originally in 2016, you started the movement to make America great again. And that means make America great again in every way. And that means safety and prosperity and peace and freedom from cartels and crime and gangs. And your vision and your leadership in declaring war on the drug cartels is the single most successful public safety initiative in American history. And I need the media to understand what President Trump has done. People have been talking about drug cartels for longer than I've been alive. And everyone has just taken for granted that they can't be touched or stopped. They're too big, they're too powerful, they're too evil, they're too murderous. They can operate with impunity. And in just 9 months, President Trump is the only American leader, not just in our lifetimes, but ever, to actually take the fight to the drug cartel.
Exactly. Stephen Miller is exactly correct. This country was dying, and it was all but dead. Economically, from a patriotic standpoint, but most importantly, we were invaded by 20 million illegal criminal aliens, a huge percentage of which were actual hardened criminals, not just criminals because they were here illegally, but hardened criminals. They were involved in drug trafficking, in human trafficking, in all sorts of violent crime. They were members of violent gangs like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. They were funded and aided and abetted by their communist handlers in Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela and others. They were here essentially at the behest, maybe not directly, but certainly indirectly, of their governments to try to ruin the United States. He's 100% correct. Then you have the cartels. The cartels, multi-billion-dollar organizations, all based on illicit activity, primarily based on two things: drug trafficking and human trafficking. Those are their two primary businesses. And up until now, just like we used to treat terrorists, that was ineffective. Let's try to interdict the drug trade. You've got drugs pouring into the country from 1,000 different, inlet points, and you can go try to interdict, 40 or 50 of them, and then you arrest a few people, and then they go to, U.S. prison for a while they're court cases waiting, while they're defended by, big time cartel lawyers. While they're out on bail. There is no deterrent there. And just like terrorists, they have, now the cartels are more money-based than terrorism was. Terrorism had a serious ideological component. But the cartels are very much money-based, but there's also this ideological backing, not necessarily from the cartels itself, but from the CCP. And the idea is to destroy the United States. Now, there's also that same ideological component from the cartels, because if you eliminate the United States, North and South America become the wild, wild West, and the cartels rule. So they also realize that there is a geopolitical, ideological component to this. So you're never going to stop them with a few court cases and some prison time. No, just like when we went to war on terrorism, that war was brutal and violent and at the point of a sword. The same thing is what Trump is doing to the cartel. The cartels were never held to account before because we had to wait for them to show up on U.S. soil, and then we had to interdict them, then we had to detain them, then they were given constitutional protections of someone who is, on trial for a crime in this country, or we tried to give money to the Colombian government, or somebody else to try to interdict their own, issues with the drug trade. And Trump has said, no, enough is enough. We are now declaring war, and we are authorizing the full force of the United States military and intelligence/security apparatuses to go cartels. And he's 100% correct. And that's why what Stephen Miller said is so true. Up until now, no one has actually put a war footing on these cartels. And this new deterrent level, as it ramps up, as it escalates, hitting a few boats here and there is not going to dent them. This is just the beginning. I believe this is, I hope, and what I believe is this is part of a sort of a gradual escalation campaign that the Trump administration is using to get people used to the idea that we are going after the cartels. We don't need shock and awe right away, but I believe we're going to get to shock and awe a little more slowly. And when we do, we will actually be able to, if not destroy, significantly impact the cartel's ability to do anything, not just in the United States, but throughout the whole of Central and South America. Now, check out, there were two interesting questions that I thought came up. And I want to address both of them because in this law enforcement roundtable, the press was there. And one of the questions they asked was of Pete Hegseth. And I want you to check this out because I thought Hegseth had an interesting answer that we can discuss.
Mr. President. some alleged smugglers have survived some of these recent strikes and been sent
Two.
back to their home country. If they're terrorists, why not just arrest and detain them?
Go ahead.
2 points on that. First, when I served in Iraq in 2005 and 2006, we used to, in sort of a gallows humor way, talk about the Iraqi catch and release program, the reality that we would catch a lot of people, hand them over, and then they would be recycled back through and we'd have to recapture them or attack them again. And that's why changing the dynamic and actually taking kinetic strikes on these boats ought change the psychology of these foreign terrorist organizations. To those two that survived the shot on the semi-submersible, think again, compared to Iraq and Afghanistan, the vast majority of people that we captured on the battlefield, we handed over to the home country. Did we always like how it shaped out? Sometimes we did, sometimes we did not. But 99% would go to the Afghan authorities or the Iraqi authorities. So in this case, those two, they were treated by American medics and handed immediately over to their countries where they came from, hopefully to face prosecution, which is a very standard way of handling something like that.
So, to that end, yes, if they survive, they will be handed back to their country of origin, maybe not the country that they drove the boat out of. For example, they may not be Venezuelan citizens. These people may be, Nicaraguans, they may be El Salvadorans, they may be Colombians. They'll be handed over to their country, potentially for prosecution. But let's say we hand them right back to Venezuela. Let's say they're from Venezuela, or we hand them to Colombia and Colombia doesn't do anything and they go back to Venezuela. They're going back with the story that, hey, my boat got bombed. I'm lucky to be alive. It starts the narrative inside the cartel that America is not playing. They can't now tell somebody, hey, go drive this boat because the worst you're going to face is some prison time. No, the worst they're going to face is death. And so that is a much different conversation. Now, the other question that I thought was fairly interesting and one that I might actually disagree with President Trump on. But check this out, because there was another question asked of Trump directly. Here we go.
If you are declaring war against these cartels and Congress is likely to approve of that process, why not just ask for a declaration of war?
Well, I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead. Okay.
This is the one place where I think I might disagree with President Trump on. Now, what he's doing is he is applying the same standards that we have applied for our war on terrorism for the last 20 plus years on the cartels. We never asked for a declaration of war on terrorism, on even Al-Qaeda. Like, we never went formally to Congress. Now, Congress did vote several times on, the War Powers Act and, the funding of money to the said war on terrorism, especially the deployment, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, where we deployed physical troops and needed extensive money to do so. But we never actually asked for a declaration of war. So Trump is saying, hey, we're just going to treat it just like the war on terror. They tried to bring drugs into our country, we're going to kill them. And we're just going to keep doing that. Now, I think that this is where Trump might actually reconsider this. I would say, yes, let's go to Congress and say we want a declaration of war on the cartels. Why? Because now you force the Democrats to put their vote on paper, a roll call vote for the House and the Senate. We want a declaration of war. Put your vote down. Are you voting with the cartels or are you going to vote with the United States of America? And you may just get a bunch of absolute Trump deranged Democrats to vote with the cartels, which becomes fodder for the midterms. It becomes fodder for the ongoing narrative war between the MAGA conservatives and the Republicans and the Democrats. It makes them look like fools. But as you get that vote, when you get that vote approved, because I don't think I would actually do this unless I could do some triaging beforehand and make sure that we had the votes, because you don't want it to go for a vote and get defeated. But then once you have the vote approved, now we go way beyond. And I think we're going to go way beyond anyway, which is why Trump's not worried about it. But now you have a mandate to go way beyond interdicting boats carrying drugs. And we start doing drone strikes on cartel safe houses, cartel production facilities, cartel storage facilities in other sovereign jurisdictions. So we see drone strikes in Colombia. We see drone strikes in Venezuela. We see drone strikes in Nicaragua. In other places. And we've turned loose the full force of the U.S. security apparatuses in the DIA, the CIA, JSOC, all of that to actually go start putting covert boots on the ground and destroying these cartels, one safe house, one production facility, one team of people at a time. And we start doing that, and we could absolutely destroy these cartels. They would find no safe haven anywhere. Let me know what you think in the comments.